Hey guys, and welcome back. In this section, we get a really fun example. We're gonna be changing some color of like leaves and berries, basically some foliage. It's a super popular trend right now. You'll see it quite a bit with like fashion and things like that. People will take a picture against a green bush and then they'll make it look like bluish or purplish and throw in some fun colors in there. So we're just gonna show you how to do it. It's relatively simple. So let's go ahead and open up our image. We're gonna double click here, intermediate coloring 5, and hit open. And I'm gonna hit F for full screen. So you can see we've got some colors here in, it's a lot of green, it's a bush. And then we've got some red berries as well. So we wanna target those separately. And really what makes these effects actually like work, what makes them stand out, is getting some color variation within like the leaves. So we're gonna show you how to add like a different highlight color to the leaves, which will be super cool. So let's go ahead and start off. I'm gonna select these berries. So if I've got a bunch of these red berries around my image, the best way to do this is to select them as a color range. So let's go to select. I'm gonna go down to color range here. Okay, and we're just gonna zoom in and I'm gonna click on, let's see, I wanna see the black matte. Yeah, that looks like a pretty good little sample there. Now, I've got my little plus eyedropper here. I'm gonna make sure I click and add, so I'm seeing, I want to make sure basically that I'm seeing all the berries. I want all the berries to be selected. There we go, so I'm clicking around in there. Now you can change your sample size here to be larger or smaller. When you're trying to really isolate these colors, I recommend using a smaller sample size. So I've got point sample selected, and that's just gonna make sure that I've got all these little berries. All right. Now, that looks pretty good. I'm not super concerned whether or not it's got a little bit of our subject in it. For now, mostly I just care about the berries. So let's go ahead. Maybe we'll bring up our fuzziness just a little bit. That's okay. It's okay if a little bit of the leaves and sticks are selected as well. So let's hit okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and load that into a hue saturation adjustment layer. Okay, let's make that invisible. And I'm gonna just basically do the same thing again. So let's go to select, down to color range. Just wanna make sure that, I want to make sure that I do this a couple of times around the image because we've got a few different berries, a few different colors, and I mean, not like super different, but like some are darker than others. So each time I make these a selection, that's okay. I'm going to just load this into the layer mask so I can continue to alter this layer mask. So let's click on layer mask, go to edit, down to fill, and I'll just fill that with white on the layer mask. And then pretty soon here, we're going to have a really nice selection. So let's just do it over here as well. So select, down to color range, just make sure we get all the colors. There we go. You can see there's the outer, a little bit of that outer berry color we weren't getting. All right. That looks nice as well. So let's hit okay. And again, all my layer masks, just go to edit, down to fill, and we're gonna fill that with white. Okay, so now that we've got all of those berries pretty much selected out, let's take a look. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and look at my layer mask. It looks pretty good. Obviously, we don't want this to be visible where our subject is visible, but the berries do look good. So that's a good start. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and group this layer with itself. Okay, let's put a layer mask on the group, and then I'm gonna be sure to just paint black over my subject on the layer mask. Okay, because I really don't need any of this stuff to show up over top of my subject. And I'm gonna color the plants too. There we go, and we'll just put them in the same group. There we go. Let's go ahead and make sure. Sometimes if you use a low flow, it won't get you a lot of coverage, so I just increase my flow, paint it on there. And keep in mind, layer masks are always editable, so it's not perfect right now, but we'll go ahead and refine that in a little bit. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and make some changes. So we've got our hue saturation adjustment layer. We've got our berries. So let's double click here. And now I can go to my colorize button and I can start to color these berries, really whatever, whatever we see fit. And just making sure that we do have pretty nice color coverage of the berries. And in fact, we do. I kind of like them like a yellowish color. That looks pretty good. Looks pretty cool. Yellowish green. All right. There we go. That looks good. And we do have some like black and stuff like that around the berries as well. That's why those colors are not being picked up, because they're just a little bit darker. So if you want to include those, what I recommend doing is, let's hold Alt or Option and look at our layer mask now. I recommend using your brush tool on your layer mask and painting with white. Change the layer blend mode from normal down to overlay. And then anything that's light is going to get even lighter. So it's going to just extend your range with the berries just a little bit, and make sure that you are in fact coloring all of those berries. There we go. So just painting white on our layer mask where the berries are. All right, and you don't really have to be precise with this because of the overlay mode of the brush. It's just kind of, and we're almost done here. You don't have to spend a ton of time on this. Now you can also see that some of the foliage has become visible, and that's because a little bit of it did get selected. But that's not a big deal. We're just going to paint with black in just a second. There we go. Just making our berries more visible. And you don't even have to be looking at this view. You can actually look at the berries. Does the same thing. There we go. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and take care of the other side of it. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option, take a look here, and I'm going to paint with black now. And when I paint with black, you're going to see that my foliage starts to disappear, but the berries stay visible. Okay? The berries stay visible because they're light. So the overlay blend mode, I'll just make a big brush and just start painting over here. The overlay blend mode basically takes anything that's dark and it's going to make it even darker. And it just leaves whatever's light, just leaves it alone, which is nice. Okay, so there we have a really nice clean selection of just the berries, and we're gonna mask out our subject separately. Now, just be sure to change your layer blend mode or your brush blend mode back to normal. If you ever are working with an overlay blend mode of your brush or whatever, just put it back to normal right after you're done using it, or it's going to trip you up. You're going to be painting with your brush tool and you're going to be like, why is it weird? It's because it's set to overlay. Let's make this layer invisible. Click on our background. I'm going to go to Select, down to Color Range. There we go. Select our leaves. Let's do the plus eyedropper. So we select a little bit more. So you can see it's basically selecting everything but the berries, and hopefully not my subject also. All right, there we go. That looks really nice. So let's hit OK. I'm going to load a hue saturation adjustment layer. We're going to put that inside of the group. There we go. And we can click on colorize here as well. So you don't have to use colorize, by the way. You can use really whatever you want. Colorize just kind of, it sets everything to kind of like the same color. So if you're going to do a big color variation, then you may want to use colorize, but you don't have to. All right, I kind of like this bluish purple color. It looks like some of these areas didn't get selected, which is not really a big deal. We just need to make this invisible. Go back to our layer, go to Select Color Range, and then be sure that these areas, in fact, do get selected. Okay, and once they're selected, just hit OK. And then here on the layer mask, just go to Edit, down to Fill, and we'll just fill them with white. All right, looking good. So it does look like those areas are actually being affected, but they were a different color to start off with. You can see they're more olive. So that's why we're gonna pop in, we're gonna change this to colorize, and that's just gonna allow us to change the colors of all of them. All right, very nice. We don't want it to be too saturated. Let's go ahead and choose an interesting color here, like this bluish purple. That looks good. We can color our berries separately as well. All right, we'll see what it looks like without colorized first. It's kind of nice, right? With some nice pink berries in there. Looking pretty cool. I do like this trend. I think it's a fun one. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, the one kind of like complaint or whatever that I have is that the green now, it's pretty flat looking, right? It doesn't look like there's a ton of variation in there. So we can go ahead and select some of the lighter colors here in in the bush, and then we can use those to create some other variations in the color. So let's go ahead and start off with that. I'm gonna make these layers invisible. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go to select down to color range. And we're just gonna start off with, yeah, right about there, and we'll bring our fuzziness up just a little bit. All right, so you can see it's not selecting everything, it's just kind of grabbing the lighter colors. And in this case, I'm just gonna grab a solid color. There we go. Let's just make it a wild color to start off with. Okay, and there we go. We can see that's just a solid color there. And then you can change the layer blend mode from normal down to color. Okay, obviously that's a wild color. So we're gonna double click here and then just change that to something that kind of fits with the mood of the image. That's kind of fun there, huh? Just need to make it a little bit darker. Pull it towards blue just a little bit more. It is nice how you can just kind of like, there we go, how you can totally colorize these things. So just adding a little bit of variation in there really helps to give it like, kind of like with the red too, but that's nice. Adding that variation in there really helps just give it a little bit more shape and makes it look, I mean, it's not like super realistic because obviously plants aren't that color, but it does help there. Now let's do the same thing with the shadows. So I'm gonna make this invisible. We're gonna go to select down to color range, and I'm just gonna pop some stuff in the shadows there. There we go, some nice shadow colors. And basically we just do the same thing. Go to a solid color. That's crazy. I think that selected too much. So let's just deselect. I'm gonna go back over here, select color range. Let's just choose my view to be grayscale so I can see. I find it's a little bit easier to tell what you're doing in grayscale. There we go. That looks about right. So it's just getting those darker colors. Now let's go ahead and pop that into a solid color fill layer. That looks good there, and we'll change our layer blend mode from normal down to color. Same thing like before. Obviously that's not the right color. All right, throw a tiny bit of like dark purple in there, and that's just gonna help it. It's pretty subtle. Let's see if we can. There we go. That looks good. Very nice. So we've got our original color here. You can see we basically just colorized all these leaves, which does look good to start, but adding these other variations in here really rounds out the color, makes it look a lot more realistic, and we color those little berries as well. So all those are in the same group. All we need to do is be sure, we go in this group and then we make sure that, hey, this is not visible over top of the subject. So it's just some layer masking going on here. There we go. Doesn't take that long to do. Bum, 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 bum. It's got a soft edge brush here. I'm just kind of like using a low flow to kind of blend these colors together, especially with an area like with hair and stuff like that. You want that to kind of blend in a little bit better. Okay. There we go. And then I'm gonna just choose a large, super soft edge brush with a flow of like 10% and just kind of go in here just a little bit around the edge of the hair, and that's just gonna help integrate it just a little bit more. You can see if I go too much, it's gonna do that. So don't wanna go too much, but just a little bit here around the edge of the hair, and that's gonna integrate it. All right, that looks pretty nice. All right, guys, we're almost done. Now I do wanna take a little bit of that color and then integrate it into the photo as well. Just bring a little bit of that color into my subject. It's gonna help her kind of like blend in a little bit better. So let's create a new layer. We can do this super quick. With our new layer, I'm just gonna use my brush tool and sample this color here, this like nice dark purple color. And we're just gonna paint right over top of our subject here. Don't have to do like a super fancy job of this. Just paint right over top. Okay, now we're gonna change this from normal down to color. So it's just gonna color our subject with that color. And we only wanna do this to the shadows. So let's just double click here. There we go. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click and drag from the right to the left. And that's just gonna make it invisible from the highlights, okay? So here's how that works. Right back there, so Alt or Option, dunk, and it's invisible to the highlights just where the shadows are. All right, and I'm just gonna lower the opacity of that just a little bit. So it's not a super strong effect, but turning this off and on, you can see it just gets a little bit of that background color into the subject, just where the shadows are, that's all you need. And it helps to integrate a little bit more, and now she looks like she's kind of like in that scene. So what a fun image, huh? There's the before and the after, and now you know how to do those really cool foliage effects that a lot of photographers that I really like, they do this kind of stuff, and I think it's so cool. So now you know how to do it. All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll see you in the next section.